let's all just take a breath. Maybe not you, but me. So my story starts at the age of 41. I found my marriage dissolving, and I had been married for over half of my life. So I had carved a pretty substantial identity as Marty the mother, Marty the wife. And with my marriage dissolving, that was changing, although my identity of his mother stayed, but I didn't pay attention to the other part of my identity. And the next 3 years were really busy, so I didn't have time to think about it then either. I was busy being in relationship after relationship, and it was all emotion and tumult, and there was one that finally ended in heartbreak. And it caused me to pause just long enough to realize that there was a pattern. Ooh, I didn't like it. I didn't want to see it because there was a common denominator. And that common denominator was me. Oh, that was awful. Although my ego was very happy to help me out and, said reassuring things like, it's not you. You're lovable. These men loved you, they adored you, you even got wedding proposals. But when I sat in that stillness, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that not one of those men loved me. And an even more painful realization was that probably my husband hadn't really loved me either. From a very young age, I became very gifted, if I can use that word, at being a chameleon. I could become whatever and whoever anybody needed of me. I learned this because that was the way I could stay safe. That was the way I was valuable, and that was the way I was seen. So as I listened to this still part of me, I realized that there was an awakening that happened, kind of like a fissure, towards the end of my marriage. And it wasn't really noticeable at that point. It was really small. But with each one of these failed relationships, it got wider and wider. And here I was standing in front of this crevice, dark black hole in the earth, and there was nothing to do but actually look at it. Oh, and I realized, okay, these men fell in love with what I presented to them. In essence, I was pretending. I had been wearing a mask, and not intentionally. It was something that came that naturally to me. But I realized if they didn't love me, because they didn't know me, I didn't know me. Did that mean I didn't love me? And I continued to prod in that dark muck. And I came to the realization that so many of those relationships I had stayed in long past their expiry date. I knew they were not good for me. And why didn't I leave? Because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel valuable. I didn't feel like anybody else would want me. But safety, that was that factor. That was the thing that brought out the chameleon. And I remember my sister was getting married. I went with her and my soon-to-be brother-in-law to Maui for their wedding, spent 7 glorious days with them. On the 7th day, they got married and they went on their honeymoon, but I was going to spend 3 days by myself at a hotel in Maui. So they were driving me to the hotel and I could feel a level of anxiousness and nervousness welling up. And by the time we got to the hotel, I was on the brink of tears. And my sister's like, what's up? And I'm like, well, the airport's like really far away and I got to check in and da-da-da-da. And she's like, what? Like, what would you do if Colin and the boys were here? And it was like I turned into a different person. I just went into military mode. Oh, we would do this, da, 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 and we would get to the airport. She goes, exactly. That's 4 people you'd be looking after. It's just you. Forget about it. And she dismissed me and walked away. However, I could not dismiss it so easily. It was like a slap in the face. I realized I had spent so much of my life actually taking care of other people's needs that I didn't know how to take care of my own. That was awful. So with all these realizations in my hand, I was like, I gotta do something here. I gotta be drastic. And I was crazy, and I made this vow. I am going to fall in love with me. I am going to fall madly in love with me like nobody has ever loved me. And I wasn't sure how I was going to do this, but I knew one thing. It meant I was going to have to be single. I did not want that. That's awful, horrible. You have to realize, since I was 18, I had not spent more than 1 week single. I had not lived alone. I had this running dialogue that was like, nobody really wants to be single. That's just for the, broken people. But I realized this chameleon trait I had was so prevalent, so natural, that in a moment I could lose the line between the authentic me and the pleasing me. So I decided single it is. To make myself feel better, I went out and I got this beautiful ring made, and I called it my deterrent band. Not only did it deter me from all the opportunities that kept popping up, because as soon as I decided to be single, everybody else was single and wanted some action. So this band helped me stay true to my vow, but I thought it was going to be, a deterrent as well. And then I decided to pursue interests and hobbies and educational aspects. And so I went to school and I started taking lessons and classes and activities. And I realized to the people that were watching from the outside that I probably looked like I was having a midlife crisis, that I was flaky and flighty. But this was no trivial task. I was navigating blind. I had no idea who I was or what I wanted or what I even liked. And so those people that are part of my tribe today were the people who were able to help me embrace exploration, who encouraged me to change my mind, to go a different direction without judgment. And shortly after this exploration started, I was in my living room and I had a revelation during a very deep meditation. It was revealed to me how crafty my shadow side is. For this deterrent band, it was not really there for the purpose that I was telling myself it was. No, it was there to help me hide, because it helped me feel more valuable. I believe that I was only valuable if somebody else saw my value. The word owned actually came up. I felt more valuable if somebody owned me. I was mortified. I felt sick. I'm like, I don't want that for me. I don't want that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to step this up a bunch. And I was like, well, how do I get to know myself quicker, better, faster than how this is working? And so what I did is I decided I was going to date myself. I was going to woo myself, and I was going to pursue me and find out what I really liked, just like an admirer would. I was so excited about this. Couldn't wait till the weekend. I got dressed up. I was going to my favorite restaurant, and so excited, get in the car, drive there, and everything was going great until I said, table for one, and I got this. Like that little sad tilt, oh, table for one. And in that moment, I was like, oh, no, this is not good. And I quickly followed him to my table and sat down as quickly as possible because I didn't want to be seen, and ordered a glass of wine, fast. And as I was drinking my wine, I became painfully aware of the glances that I was receiving. I had never eaten alone before. And what was more to my dismay was, as I sat in that uncomfortable stillness, was watching the stories that I attached to those glances. And I let it get me all rattled for a moment, and then I allowed it to settle. I think the wine maybe helped with that too. But I then ordered an appetizer, because if I was on a date, I would order an appetizer, because my desire was to get the hell out of there as fast as I could. But I was, nope. So I had my appetizer, I had my entree. By the time I had dessert and coffee, believe it or not, I was actually having a good time, and I didn't notice the glances. I'm sure they were still there, but I didn't care. So that was my Band-Aid moment. That date, that restaurant, because in that horrible uncomfortableness was also a little bit of beauty. A little bit of soul was found there. And each date that I was able to take myself on after that was easier and easier. I went to concerts. I took myself to the opera. I did dinner and a date. I went social dancing solo. Yep, I did. And you know, these events were not always easy to go to as a single person. I remember at the beginning quite often looking at, especially couples, you know, that were super affectionate and being like, oh, gross, God, oh, and being actually really bitter about it. But I knew I turned a corner one day in the spring when I was walking down Granville and a busker was playing Unchained Melodies. We all know that song, it's so beautiful. And there was a lovely young tourist couple on the side of the street and they were dancing. And I didn't even think twice about it. My heart was just full for the appreciation and the experience that they were having. And I was like, yes, I've turned a corner. This is okay. I am okay by myself. I don't need somebody else to feel that way. And so I continued to nurture that. What I've learned through this single solo journey that I did was to love myself did not mean that I had to be perfect. Far from it. It meant that I had to accept and embrace those parts that I don't really like, and to find a softness and a gentleness when I looked at them, to understand why they're there, and then gently change them. Because it's only when we go within that we find our real beauty, our real value, oh, I'm gonna cry, and our real strength. And when we've found that, that's when we can show up for others in relationship. That's when we show up for our best life. And it is my hope for every one of you in here that you find that kind of relationship. And I just want to tell everybody that my relationship is not over. It is going to be a lifelong love affair. And I plan to continue to deepen my understanding of myself so that will allow me to show up better and deeper for my relationships. Thanks.